1/3 of those babies will die from a disease. Leading cause of death for severe preemies.
And you said they're not born with it. They can develop it at any point. You could think you're out of the water, they're good, and then all of a sudden, boom, 24 hours.
We believe the therapeutic we're going to bring to market will prevent the disease among this severely premature baby population.
What got you into this? How did you get into biotech?
Once I left the military, having flown airplanes in the Navy, I transitioned to packaged goods with Johnson & Johnson, having marketed Tylenol back in the day.
That's so cool. You were part of marketing for Tylenol? I mean, that's huge. That's one of the most widely used pharmaceutical drugs on the planet. Tell me about some of the greatest advice you've received.
He said, "Rob, you're a pretty smart guy. We're having this conversation. The reality is, I'm going to win this discussion unless..."
We are here with Rob, who is the CEO of, is it Plakous?
Plakous Therapeutics.
Plakous Therapeutics. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much, Dustin. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kick things off. And if you just want to give me a bit of a background on the company, tell me what it is that you guys do.
Sure. So Plakous Therapeutics was founded with the concept of how do we leverage birth tissue. So we've been in existence now for nearly 10 years and have made great progress in our primary mission, which is to eradicate the potential for a rare pediatric disease called necrotizing enterocolitis. And we believe the therapeutic we're going to bring to market will prevent the disease among this severely premature baby population, which in our patients, we're looking at babies born before 30 weeks of gestation, so more than 3 months premature.
Wow. So more than 3 months premature. And your goal is to prevent diseases or treat diseases or both?
We believe that we can prevent the disease. So necrotizing enterocolitis affects babies after they're born. So you're not born with the disease. It's a comorbidity, if you will, of severe prematurity. You're born yesterday, you were breathing amniotic fluid, you were swallowing amniotic fluid, and you were swimming in the amniotic fluid, and it was providing the signals to your gut to develop. The stem cells that are in your gut were getting signaling from that amniotic fluid. You were suddenly born much too soon. And so our product essentially mimics amniotic fluid. And so the concept is to deliver this amniotic fluid back into the gut, the nascent gut of these severely premature babies, to provide that signaling so that their gut will continue to develop.
That's amazing. How far along are you in the process? Have you gone through animal models?
We've gone through one animal model. We've got proof of concept in a premature piglet model, which is the gold standard for the disease necrotizing enterocolitis. And in the work that we did, we showed that ultimately we reduced the severity of the disease dramatically. And so when we think about necrotizing enterocolitis or NEC, there's medical NEC, which means you're very sick, but we don't necessarily have to operate on you. And then there's surgical NEC, where the necrosis has started and the baby's gut has started to die. It's potentially cracked, and what's inside is getting out, and what's outside is getting in. And what happens then is that surgery is going to have to happen. We're going to resect the bowel of this less than 2-pound baby. And what we saw in our preclinical work is that there were no perforations of the gut. So we think we can prevent completely surgical NEC, and that will be the goal. And then treat medical NEC would become less severe than it is. So we're not a vaccine, but we operate very much like that, in that you may still get NEC, but it will be much less severe. And that has obviously a significant impact on life, as well as healthcare costs. Interestingly, Dustin, what we also saw was that our treated animals versus untreated were gaining weight at a much higher rate. And so that really indicates to us that the gut is in fact developing more rapidly. And the knock-on benefits of that are, you're going to be able to eat better, you're going to be able to tolerate better. And ultimately, by gaining weight, you're going to be able to get out of the hospital sooner and likely prevent a lot of the other comorbidities associated with severe prematurity. There are a number of other diseases, retinopathy,
Mm-hmm.
prematurity, or bronchopulmonary dysplasia, other diseases that manifest among these babies that we think if you get the gut healthy, you're going to get the rest of the body healthy. Even neurologic deficit, we think we can reduce, which is
Wow. All from the gut.
unfortunately common. All from the gut.
All from the gut. That's amazing. So tell me, I'm sure it's not a pretty picture, but walk me through what are the symptoms of this disease if gone untreated? It sounds like it's probably fatal, I would assume.
It is.
Yeah.
So in this, it's a rare pediatric disease. So in the U.S., there are about 3,000 cases a year. And among those 3,000 cases, about 1/3 of those babies will die from the disease. So it is a very devastating. It's the leading cause of death for severe preemies from about 4 days to 4 weeks. So once the baby's born, the lungs are number one. We got to get
Mm-hmm.
this
Yeah.
baby breathing. But
That's
once
why it
you've
was my first thought.
stabilized them, yeah, once you stabilize their lungs and you can get them breathing, the next thing is neck. And the unfortunate thing is it's very fulminated. The onset is very rapid. So you could have a baby that's progressing well and tolerating their feeds, and then all of a sudden you notice that their gut is distended. Maybe you notice there's some blood in their stool, and the next thing you know, you're at general quarters and you're doing x-rays to determine if there's air inside the bowel and do we need to open this baby up. But from onset to death could be within 24 hours. It's really tragic.
Wow. And you said they're not born with it. They can develop it at any point.
Correct. And
You know the risk is there
tragically,
because they're premature, but you could
exactly.
think you're out of the water, they're good, and then all of a sudden, boom, 24 hours. Wow, that's
Yeah. And
horrific.
tragically, there's no diagnostic test. So what we know is that the babies that are at risk are babies born before 30 weeks of gestation. And in the US every year, there's about 50,000 of those babies. And what we know is that about 3,000 of them will get the disease. The challenge is we don't know which of those 50,000. So at Plakous, what we will look to do is treat prophylactically that patient population of up to 50,000 babies in order to prevent the disease.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
we think it's an appropriate decision to make. And as I mentioned earlier, the fact that our product is developing the gut and we think we can eliminate some of those comorbidities helps answer the question that many have, which is, well, you're treating 50,000 to prevent just 3,000 cases. Is it worth it to do that? And the answer, first and foremost, we believe is yes. However, for those that would be a little more skeptical, the fact that we have the ability to prevent some of these other comorbidities and increase overall health makes that prophylactic treatment a little more, well, frankly, much more palatable.
Yeah, and I think so by giving them this treatment, there's no drawbacks, right? Are there any negative or unexpected side effects?
We don't believe there will be. We still have to complete a tox study, and we're currently raising funds to do that. But the product is derived from human placental tissue and processed. So we essentially extract the proteins from the placental organ. There are cytokines and growth factors in there. And by putting something that, again, mimics amniotic fluid that's derived from the product that filters and creates amniotic fluid, we think that the safety risk of our product is extremely low.
That's great. I mean, with that, it just kind of comes down to logistics and cost. I mean, it makes sense because you think about, yeah, you're going to treat 50,000 babies to save 3,000, and that's, sounds, it's a rare disease. But if you think about being a parent of one of those 3,000 babies,
Exactly.
it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I did a little digging and I went to your website and I noticed that you guys have received a noticeable amount of funding through grants, through support from the NC Biotech Center, which I love. Where are you guys at right now? What's kind of the ask? What's the next steps?
Sure. So we're right now looking for our first equity raise. So all of the monies that we've raised heretofore have been through primarily high net worth individuals. We do, as you indicated, have some institutional monies. Mayo Clinic Ventures has made an investment, the North Carolina Biotech Center, and then we feel very good about the validation that we've gotten from the National Institute of Health.
Hmm.
So we've raised about 10 million altogether, about half of that on convertible notes and the other half through grant funding. Right now, we're seeking $20 million in a Series A, and that 20 million will get us through our IND enabling studies and the IND, and allow us to complete our phase 1/2 clinical trial.
Oh, that's
So
great.
it's a pretty efficient use of
Yeah.
funds. And so we look at that with a couple of milestones. The first milestone, of course, being to get the IND, that investigational new drug application, which allows us to start our clinical trials. And that's going to be about $8 million to get the study, our tox study done and our manufacturing complete. And then the second tranche, if you will, would be to complete that phase 1/2 study. We've had a successful pre-IND meeting with the agency, so we're aligned on the tox study. We're aligned on our manufacturing process and the structure of that phase 1/2 study. So we feel very good about the path forward. And given that clarity, we also have been able to budget pretty effectively. So there's always things that can happen, but we feel pretty good about what we need to do and what the costs will be.
Yeah, I mean, 20 million to take you from where you are preclinical to through phase 1/2. I mean, that's very efficient, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. So is the cost of treatment or developing the treatment relatively low, producing it?
It's not. Of course, it's all relative, but our supply is the placental tissue, and that's not a concern whatsoever. There's already a very robust market for amniotic membrane products. There are many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of tissue donated. And all of those products use the umbilical cord or the amniotic membrane, which we don't utilize in our process. So supply chain is not a concern, but the manufacturing of this biologic is not inexpensive. So we're still working on what those numbers will be. And interestingly, Dustin, to address that, we have done some market research. We've hired a couple of firms to validate what the price could be and frankly what the market will bear. And we're very encouraged in talking to, we did some qualitative research with hospitals, folks that are responsible for purchasing and specifically purchasing in the NICU. And all of them believe that the price that we think we're going to come to market will be acceptable given the claims that we're going to be able to make, assuming obviously it all comes down to the data. But fundamentally, if we can do what we believe we can do, the market will be there for us.
That's amazing. So you've got a model and you just have to, at this point, really raise the funds and execute.
Correct. Correct.
So what comes next? Let's say everything goes well, you get the funding, we get through phase 1/2, we get all the way to the clinic. What's next for Plakous Therapeutics? Is there another indication you'd be exploring? Or are you looking to exit?
Well, the answer to that is yes and yes. And so, once we complete the phase 1/2, and we've shown safety and efficacy, and we believe we'll be able to show direct medical benefit through our phase 1/2 study, if not completely for NEC, certainly for weight gain, feeding tolerance.
Hmm.
And so we feel very good that we'll have a strong indicator of success, a very strong indicator of success, which would allow us to exit. And there are a number of companies out there right now that are treating in the NICU. But what's interesting is the product is, at its core, our product is anti-inflammatory and proliferative. So if you think about diseases of inflammation where you need to tamp down inflammation and you also need to regrow, regenerate cells, we've got a great mechanism for that. So we believe that diseases of the lungs, we'll certainly look to expand into BPD in the NICU. So it's another rare pediatric disease that we think follows very closely. But the corollary to that would be ARDS for
Hmm.
adults. We also think that if we can tamp down inflammation in the gut, there are opportunity in Crohn's and IBD. So we do think that there are opportunities. We've got some data that support osteoporosis as well as osteoarthritis. So there are a number of follow-on indications that we are prepared to go forward with, or if we exit, we would certainly encourage the strategic to be interested in those expansion opportunities as well.
Very cool. Very interesting. So, as a whole, right now for the company, obviously you have different pathways you could go. Are you leaning more towards licensing the technology or maintaining it and providing it as a product?
We're still debating that. Certainly, we love the idea of bringing the product to market and seeing the success. But that's a change. And while that's my background has been on the commercial side prior and something I'm very excited to do, what we'll want to do is ensure that our current investors and those that bring us through the journey, we're all aligned on what that next step is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, one thing in this industry that we always like to keep our focus on is at the end of the day, the goal is to get the treatment to the patients. And it's fulfilling to see that through and to see the impact that all of your work over this last decade, or how long you've been working on it has come to fruition and has saved lives and really made a big difference. And balancing that with, again, like you said, we have our fiduciary responsibilities to the investors and they want to see the return on their investment. It's a big decision to make. I see why you would be kind of juggling with that. And it's a long way down the road.
We've got some time.
You've got some time. But I can tell by talking with you and knowing a little bit about your background that you are very passionate about what you do. What got you into this? How did you get into biotech?
Well, it's been an interesting evolution. So I've been in healthcare for the majority of certainly my business career once I left the military. And having flown airplanes in the Navy, I transitioned to packaged goods with Johnson and Johnson, and it's really just been a series of what seemed at the time to be logical steps forward. But having marketed Tylenol back in the day, a product for which I still believe is very safe.
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool. You were part of marketing for Tylenol? I mean, that's huge. That's one of
Yes.
the most
So
widely used pharmaceutical drugs on the planet. That's very cool.
yeah.
And it's apparently in part to some of your marketing.
Yes, learned a lot,
That's so
transitioning from
cool.
the military into corporate America, being at J&J in a packaged goods marketing role was a tremendous first step in the business world, and learned a lot, met a lot of great people there, which really started me on this journey. Left J&J in marketing and went to my first startup, which was essentially a marketing agency where we were marketing direct to physicians on behalf of large brands in the pharmaceutical world. Did that, sold that company, then went and ultimately went to a second startup in the diagnostics world, looking at some post-processing of digital images for early looks at in mammography in particular, but also in the cath lab for obstructions. And did that for several years, led that through some regulatory hurdles, and then ultimately was recruited by one of our board members at Plakous, Alison London Brown, with whom I had worked at J&J years before, and she is still on the board and a great supporter of the company, and said, "Hey, Rob, I think this one's got an opportunity. I think you'd be well suited for it." So she lured me away 6 years now ago to come and join Plakous, and it's been a tremendous journey.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's quite diverse. And first of all, thank you for your service.
I
I'm
appreciate that.
also a veteran and
Oh,
respect the
great.
journey from military to
Likewise.
biotech and healthcare because it's not a direct path.
It's not,
Yeah.
indeed.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell me about a piece of advice that you received that maybe at first was unconventional or you thought this isn't going to work, but you followed through and turned out to be some of the greatest advice you've received.
I had a boss at J&J who was Tony Vernon, who I have tremendous respect for. And he and I were having a debate one day, and he said, we had a different perspective on the next step. And he said, "Rob, you're a pretty smart guy. And, I think you know where you're going." He said, "I'm a pretty smart guy too." And he said, "If we're having this conversation, the reality is he was the president of McNeil Consumer, the J&J company at the time, and I was a brand manager, product director." He said, "But I'm going to win this discussion." He said, "Unless you've got data." He said, "If you bring data to me, then you force my hand, and that will give you the position to win. And and looking back, it seems so obvious, and I was in, and we had done plenty of consumer marketing. But to me, that's always stuck, is follow the data. And sometimes you have to set your passion and compassion aside. If the data says this is the reality, you've got to accept that. And again, it's something you need to understand, ask questions, and challenge. But the data is the data.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that it started from an argument. And I like that he said, listen, if it's going to be an argument, I'm going to win. But if you could show me the data, I have to accept that. That's great.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what I love about this world too. Is my mind is I'm very analytical, very data driven, and you see that in healthcare and biotech. And so I love being in this sector because for the most part, it's fact or fiction. There's not a lot of interpretation. It's there or it's not. And I like that. I
Right.
like
Trust the science.
trust the
That's
science. Yep.
the key. Yes.
Very good. So what's the worst piece of advice you've received?
Wow. The worst piece of advice I received. I had an opportunity to, while I was still at J&J, do an overseas opportunity. And I talked to someone that I trusted, and they said, don't do it. It's the worst thing you'll ever do. And I didn't do it. And I would say, I don't know if it's the worst piece of advice, but it's one that I look back on and say, I kind of wish I got additional input and took that opportunity to do an overseas gig
Yeah.
while I was at Change, and I actually had opportunity to go to Japan or to Europe. Um, Ended up staying in the States. Ultimately, I don't regret it, but it's one I often wonder.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, you never know about had that challenged or changed the trajectory of your career. And of course, you love where
Exactly.
you are now, and you're
I love where I
exactly
am
where
now.
you're supposed to be. But that'll
Right.
always kind of you'll wonder in the back of your head, man, what might have happened.
Exactly.
Well, that's funny. Very good, very good. So let's turn it around. What advice would you have for young business leaders who want to advance in their career? Maybe they're in healthcare and they're kind of at a plateau and they want to move forward. What advice would you have?
Well, I think one, believe in yourself, and two is persist. I'm a firm believer of it's hard, and in the world that I'm in today, trying to raise money, it's hard, and it can be very discouraging. And you certainly get a lot more no's than you get yeses. So I say persist. If you believe in what you do, persist and be passionate. At the same time, when that voice inside you says, we're done, follow that voice, because I think many companies that don't succeed for good reasons, not everybody succeeds, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's very devastating. But when you know it's not going to happen, it's time to stop. And I've been discouraged by companies that I've been in where you're continuing to raise money, but you know that you're putting bad money after good. So trust yourself, back to that following of the data, but also persist. Don't get discouraged.
No, I love that. And that's most people don't recognize or say, it's just all you hear. And I listen to a lot of motivational things and they're, oh, never give up and, drag yourself through the mud. It doesn't matter. The end could be right. But having the awareness to know truly when it's over is just as powerful as that persistence. And I agree. Push yourself, be persistent, don't give up, don't quit. But if you really know and you're looking at the data and you're seeing, hey, this isn't going to work out in the end, know when to pull the cord before it gets worse.
You and I both have some military experience. That one of the greatest successes in military history was the retreat from Dunkirk.
Hmm.
And so one might say that was a massive failure because we were in the continent prepared to move forward, and we didn't. We, the Allies, did not have an opportunity to move forward. Some would say that's a failure. You didn't keep moving. But you know what? You back up, you move a different direction. And sometimes you have to.
Yeah. Yep. And you rely on your support group, right? And so in those instances where you fall and you see things as a failure, you rely on your support group. And I think it's important to surround yourself with people who will then lift you up and challenge you. Then what's next? This may have been your failure, but what's next? And along those lines, you're a bullpen member, and we're here talking about the money ball. So tell me a little bit about that experience. How did you meet bullpen? How did you come into contact with them, and how's it been so far?
I am a huge fan of the bullpen and very have tremendous respect for Christian and what he's done. My first bullpen event goes back to JP Morgan in 2020, 2024, when the very, very first time around. And I don't know if I saw something on LinkedIn about figuring out how to manage at JP Morgan because it's daunting. I've been to JP
Yeah.
Morgan more times than I'd like to recall, and it's hard to get a foothold. And I found a kind of a webinar on how to manage at JP Morgan and through this entity called the bullpen. And so I went to the webinar and participated and went down that first year and thought this is something unique and something special, and have been a founding member for quite a while now. And kind of, I'm proud of the fact that I was in early, but I think what it does have, it's a great ecosystem, I guess is what I want to say. The fact that it's open to many, but there's also opportunities to be a member. And I would advocate for anyone to join and be a member of the bullpen, because while you get a lot from the outside as a guest, it's so much richer from the inside.
Yeah, and you've taken that to the next level now, being a part of the Moneyball program, and so now you're working with coaches to tailor your pitch, make introductions to investors. What's that experience like for you, from your side?
It's great. I like to think I'm a very coachable person, and so I am very open to, but the feedback that you get, and every time I talk about my company and I present it and I get input, and the coaches from the bullpen are terrific. And you get it from a lot of different perspectives. You get it from folks with media backgrounds. You get it with folks with hardcore investing backgrounds. You get it from folks who have successfully commercialized products from startups. And so you really need to surround yourself with all of those inputs. At the end of the day, it's still on me with Plakous to make sure I'm capturing the essence of what needs to be said. And so that's a great perspective getting from the bullpen, because you get it from a lot of different directions.
Yeah, I love that, and that's one thing I really like about bullpen is we all come with our strengths and our deficiencies, but when we come as a group, and like I said, we pick each other up. I mean, that's amazing because you have the marketing experience, but it's still great to hear from another marketing expert who's currently doing it today, or the investors, the ones who are actually investing in companies. Maybe they're not interested in investing in Plakous, even better, because then they can tell you what you can do to make yourself stronger to the investors who are interested. I mean, there's nothing like it out there.
There really isn't. And then add to that the foothold that you get at both Bio and
Mhm.
JPM. And I know several others. I've participated in multiple bios with the bullpen and multiple JP Morgans. And I was out at the Mayo Clinic with the team earlier this year. Well run programs that really do put you in a place for success. Ultimately, they can't make you successful, but they can certainly help you put yourself in position to be so.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, Rob, anything that I didn't cover, anything you want to talk about your company or your experience?
No, I think, we covered where we're headed and how we got to where we are. So grateful for next steps, and look forward to this Series A, raising this $20 million with the support of the bullpen.
Yeah, perfect.